This story, titled The Lies We Tell Ourselves. My name is Rebecca. I'm 48 years old, living in a quiet suburb in Ohio. I've been married to my husband David for 22 years. We have two grown children, a beautiful home, and a life that, on the surface, seemed as steady as the ticking of a clock. But sometimes, the things you think are unshakable begin to crack in ways you can't ignore. It all started a few months ago. David had always been a man of routine: work, gym, home. Like clockwork, he'd be home by 6:30 every evening, a predictable comfort in a world full of uncertainties. But then, something changed. One evening, he came home at 8, his tie loosened and an excuse ready on his lips. "There was a last-minute meeting," he said, his voice casual, almost rehearsed. I believed him, why wouldn't I? But then it happened, again, and again. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. David was a hard worker, dedicated to his job, but my gut wouldn't quiet down. Something felt off. His explanations started to feel hollow, like they were carefully chosen to avoid more questions. One night, as he walked through the door, I noticed the faintest trace of perfume on his shirt. It wasn't mine. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, a lot of back-to-back meetings." But something inside me shifted. A quiet doubt took root in my mind, one I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I decided to take action. I called his office under the guise of asking about a work event, but the receptionist mentioned he had left early the day before. My heart sank. Where had he been? That night, I confronted him. "David," I began, my voice trembling, "where were you yesterday after work?" He froze, his fork hovering midair. "What do you mean? I told you I had a meeting." I shook my head, my heart pounding. "I called your office. They said you left early." His face darkened, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "Rebecca, are you checking up on me now? This is ridiculous." "David, I'm your wife," I said, my voice breaking. "I have every right to know where you've been. You've been coming home late, lying about meetings. I just want the truth." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Rebecca, you're being paranoid. There's nothing going on. I just needed some space, that's all. Work has been stressful." But his words didn't reassure me. They only deepened the pit in my stomach. The next few weeks were a blur of suspicion and doubt. Every time his phone buzzed, every time he came home late, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I started to question everything: his excuses, his behavior, even my own sanity. Was I overreacting, or was there something he wasn't telling me? One evening, I decided to follow him after work. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I hated the idea of sneaking around, of spying on the man I had shared my life with. But I needed answers. As I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away from his office, my heart raced. I watched as he left the building, his briefcase in hand. But instead of heading home, he turned in the opposite direction. I followed him to a small cafe on the edge of town. My breath caught in my throat as I saw him sit down across from a woman. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, with long dark hair and a bright smile. They laughed, leaning in close as they talked. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. That night, I didn't confront him. I couldn't. I needed time to process what I had seen. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? A colleague? A friend? Or something more? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I searched through his phone records, his credit card statements, looking for anything that might give me a clue. And that's when I found it. A series of charges at the same cafe dating back months. When David came home that evening, I was waiting for him. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. He looked at me, his expression wary. "What's going on?" "I know about the cafe," I said, holding up the credit card statement. "I saw you there. Who is she, David?" His face paled, and for a moment I thought he might deny it. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Her name is Jessica," he said quietly. "She's a colleague. We've been working on a project together." "Working?" I said, my voice rising. "David, I saw the way you looked at her. That's not work. That's something else." He didn't respond, his silence speaking volumes. Tears filled my eyes as I stood there, waiting for him to say something, anything, that might make this all make sense. "Rebecca," he finally said, his voice soft, "I never meant to hurt you. I don't know. Things have been different between us lately. I didn't mean for this to happen." His words cut through me like a knife. I stood there staring at David as his words echoed in my ears. I didn't mean for this to happen. That single sentence, so simple and yet so devastating, unraveled the trust we had built over 2 decades. "David," I said, my voice trembling, "what exactly happened? Was it just emotional, or did it go further than that?" He hesitated, his eyes darting away from mine. That hesitation spoke louder than any confession could. It was never about physical things, he stammered. But we've grown close. She listens to me in a way that feels easy. I don't know how it got this far. I felt a wave of emotions crash over me. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and a strange kind of numbness. How could he sit there and justify his actions as if they were inevitable, as if this was something that simply happened to him? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Do you love her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, guilt etched across his face. "No," he said quickly. "I don't love her. I love you, Rebecca. But things between us haven't been the same. We've been distant, and I didn't know how to fix it." His words stung, not because they were entirely untrue, but because he had chosen to seek solace in someone else rather than face our problems together. "You should have talked to me, David," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You should have told me how you felt instead of turning to her. Do you even realize what you've done to us? To me?" He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Over the next few days, the house felt heavy with unspoken words. David tried to show remorse in small ways, making dinner, leaving me notes apologizing for his actions, promising that he would end things with Jessica. But my heart was fractured, and I didn't know if those pieces could ever be put back together. One night, as I sat alone in our bedroom, I found myself scrolling through old photo albums. Pictures of our wedding, family vacations, birthdays. The life we had built together stared back at me, a bittersweet reminder of what we had once been. I wanted to believe that we could get back to that place, but doubt lingered like a shadow. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. The next weekend, David and I decided to go to couples therapy. It was his suggestion, and while I was hesitant, I knew we needed an unbiased space to untangle the mess we were in. During our first session, the therapist asked us to share how we were feeling. "Rebecca," she said gently, "what's the hardest part of this situation for you?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the words to explain the storm inside me. "I feel betrayed," I said finally. David was supposed to be my partner, my safe place. But instead of coming to me when he felt something was wrong, he went to her. It makes me wonder if I've been enough for him. David's eyes welled with tears as he listened to my words. "You've always been enough," he said, his voice breaking. "This isn't about you, Rebecca. It's about me and my own insecurities. I let myself believe that I needed someone else to fill a void that I should have been working on myself." The therapist nodded, her expression thoughtful. "David, it sounds like there's a lot of guilt and regret on your end. But repairing a relationship isn't just about apologizing. It's about consistent actions that show accountability and a commitment to rebuilding trust. Are you willing to put in that work?" "I am," David said without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll end things with Jessica. I'll do therapy, whatever Rebecca needs." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to weather this storm, but a part of me wondered if it was already too late. In the weeks that followed, David stayed true to his word. He ended all contact with Jessica, deleted her number, and even switched departments at work to avoid any chance of running into her. He poured himself into therapy and made every effort to be present in our marriage. But despite his efforts, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something had shifted between us. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the fact that he had allowed himself to seek comfort in someone else instead of coming to me. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me and said, "Rebecca, I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. And I know I can't force you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm not giving up on us. You're my everything." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him, the man I had loved for more than 2 decades. "David," I said, my voice steady, "I want to believe in us, but it's going to take time. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight." He nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "I'll wait as long as it takes," he said. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that healing wasn't just about forgiving David. It was also about forgiving myself for the doubts and insecurities that had crept in. It was about rediscovering who I was outside of this marriage, finding strength in my own identity. This journey wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. If this story resonates with you, like, comment, and subscribe.